Capitol Hill to Wall Street. This is Politics and Profits with your host, Rick Amato.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Rick Amato. It's time for Politics and Profits.
We follow the trends on Capitol Hill that lead to the profits on Wall Street. We expose the hard facts of what your elected officials are doing when you're not looking. And we show you how you can profit from their politics. The American dream is alive and well, and you can be proud to call America your home. And now, it's Rick Amato.
Broadcasting from the Liberatory CPA studios, this is Politics and Profits. Welcome, everyone. What is going on in New York City? You can say the same thing about Portland and Seattle, but let's focus on New York for just a moment. It, along with the two aforementioned cities, was named an anarchist city. Is that politics, or does it deserve that label? Join me this time from outside of New York City in Connecticut is Fox Business News reporter, frequent guest here at Politics and Profits, Charlie Gasparino. Charlie, you're there, you're living it, you're seeing it. Is this a fair label to apply to New York City?
Just so you know, I've been out of the city for 6 months. I'm going to be back in next week, see my apartment for the first time. My brother is an ICU doctor at Brooklyn Hospital, so he's in there every day. Friends of mine are still there. Here's what I would say. I mean, some of this is politics, obviously. De Blasio is a Democrat, frequent critic of the president. He's the mayor. The governor of the state, Andrew Cuomo, same thing. But, and there's a big but, you cannot underplay the type of criminality that's going on in pockets of the city. I mean, what Mayor de Blasio did during the pandemic was essentially to help some of these hotels. I mean, I guess the intention was good. He put homeless shelters. He basically converted high-end hotels in residential neighborhoods to homeless shelters. And if you know anything about homeless men in New York City, they run the gamut from ex-cons to most of them have drug problems. Some of them are severely mentally ill.
Sure.
So this was like not what you should do in a residential neighborhood, and it ramped up crime and quality of life issues in particular neighborhoods. And then we're talking mainly Manhattan here. So you know there are parts of Manhattan, from what I understand right now, that are just like the old New York City, Upper East Side, for example. There are parts of Manhattan that aren't. On top of that, the cops. You know, we're on stand down for a large extent, and that may be changing now. I don't hear as much about that right now as I did initially. But you know, so the quality of life issues in Manhattan in particular was very bad. Boroughs are different. I can tell you, I have family in Queens. It's relatively normal. It's. These are residential areas to begin with, so people live in these areas, and every now and then there's a protest, but it doesn't take on the same anarchist level that it does in parts of Manhattan. Parts of Manhattan is you could say, particularly before the newspapers began covering this every day, particularly the New York Post. Parts of Manhattan did devolve into anarchy. There's no doubt, and I got this from people who are living there, have to go to work there. Women being chased down the street by homeless men. And then not to mention looting, rioting, protests. That every time these protests you hear largely peaceful protests, there was a huge violent element to it.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of cliche is so hysterical to anybody that lives in these areas that I can't believe TV networks. I keep reading that chyron on the bottom, largely peaceful protests.
Yeah, it lacks credibility when these TV networks, cable TV networks, CNN, MSNBC, I'll name them, when they go out there in New York Times, Washington Post, when they go out there use that phrase. Quick final question on this topic, Charlie. Do you think that this is reminiscent of when? Somewhat reminiscent, and you would know better than I do because you're living there, of when Rudy Giuliani came into office years ago. Might we see the same thing next next election for the mayor of New York City?
Well, I think it's actually worse. I think David Dinkins did a better job with law and order.
Yeah.
That was the mayor, and he was criticized by Giuliani, and that's why Giuliani won. But I think you can make the case he was a much better mayor in terms of running the city than Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio seems to be sort of out of touch with everything. I mean, we've dealt. They locked down the city in a way that COVID right now in the city is almost non-existent. If you know anybody that works at a hospital, and I know a lot of people that do, including my brother. If there was ever a time to open up, the economy in a more significant way, now is the time, with restrictions. And I get it. Yet he kind of ignored that. The only reason why restaurants at the end of the month can do 25% occupancy is because the restaurant association said if you don't do that, 90% of them are going to go out of business.
Huh.
And there was nonstop coverage of it. So this is a mayor that's oblivious to quality of life problems. The governor has to own some of this. Obviously, if Andrew Cuomo was mayor, he'd run the city a lot better and a lot differently. I know that for a lot of reasons. But he owns some of it because he kind of allowed Bill de Blasio to get away with it.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
And then there's the real question whether they should have locked down as strictly as they did. Here's the thing. I'm not a guy that's going to call the coronavirus a hoax. My brother got it on the job. He got a very bad case of it, as a matter of fact. So it does exist, and it's not fun. But the whole notion of locking down severely was to get the hospitals ready. They were ready by late May, no doubt.
Wow.
After a massive surge of cases. So there is a case to be made that they shouldn't have locked down the economy so big. Because once you lock down the economy, then everything else falls apart. I mean, literally, Midtown Manhattan, from what I understand, even now is a ghost town.
Charlie, we're down to less than a minute, so I'm going to ask you to keep your answer brief. Fox Business News reporter that you are. Is it too early to know if this stock market is forecasting the election outcome in November?
I don't think it is yet. I think this is more or less, stocks have to reflect corporate earnings, and corporate earnings are often a reflection of the economy and where things are heading in the economy. And if you thought, think about it, Dow 30,000 was unrealistic.
Yeah.
In many ways, right? Unless it's just purely Fed induced, zero interest rates, nowhere to put your money. But based on corporate earnings, it was unrealistic. I think a more realistic level for the Dow is 22, 23,000, 24, right? Kind of where it is now, maybe a little lower. And I think that's clearly not Armageddon,
right?
But it's not, it's more of a reflection of where we are economically. And then at some point, I think the markets will react to the presidential election. I think and some people may be, fixing their portfolios. But the real sort of problem for investors, I think, is if the Democrats sweep everything. Then you do have the potential for massive fiscal policy change, and that's where you got to watch your portfolio. But I don't think people are focused on that right now. Right. They may be after the first debate, which is next week.
Good point. Charlie, I know you're on a tight schedule. We won't keep you. Next time on, we're going to go into detail about what happens if the Democrats do get a debate. Your take on that. Do get a sweep. What happens on that market? Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business News. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it.
Broadcasting from the Liberatory CPA studios. Back with more after this.
Politics and Profits with Rick Amato is brought to you by Liberatory Accounting, the IRS problem solvers. To find out how Liberatory Accounting can help you, call 877-6-SOLVER. That's 877-6-SOLVER.